Boo, jump scare. Yes, it's not a Scottish War of Independence video. I've ran out of those videos to backlog. There will be more. There'll be a Siege of Edinburgh Castle, Thomas Randolph documentary, and also the Irish battles that took place as well. But for now, I feel like it's best to move on to a new topic that I quite like and find interesting. The Anglo-Zulu War. I have posted this month's plan for this video agenda. Next month, it'll finish up with the Zulu War. There'll be 4 videos on this. 4 videos. And in this video, we are going over the Battle of Isandlwana. And I'll just give some backstory on the Zulus, because, you know, that's what it encompasses. The Zulu kingdom, known as KwaZulu, rose from a minor Nguni clan into a fearsome military power under one man. Fans on. Shit, my bad. Shaka Zulu. In the early 19th century, Shaka revolutionised Southern African warfare, creating a regimental system based on age, loyalty and iron discipline. Young men were forced into the Impi, elite warrior regiments, forbidden to marry until they had proven themselves in battle. Kinda like modern Redditors. It didn't make sense. The Zulu army wielded the Ikolwa. There's a lot of African words in this that my ape-brain Scottish Celtic man cannot pronounce. So, suck it. A short stabbing spear designed for close combat, kinda like a duck, but a spear, so nothing alike. Advanced in tight formations using the horns of the buffalo tactic. A picture of it is right here. The head would attack the enemies, the lines at the back would be like a reserve, and the horde would encircle and flank the enemy. This had secured them an empire, a massive empire over their enemies. And there's a bunch of videos you can watch on, and I might even make some videos on Zulu warfare, but like in battles with other tribes. But I kind of want to work on the Zulu War first and some other stuff before that. By the 1870s, Shaka's legacy was carried on by King Cetshwayo Kimpande, who came into power after a bloody civil war against his brother. His rule was marked by military strength, cultural pride, and growing friction with European powers, especially the British, who wanted the Zulu land and labour. The British Empire had set its eyes on Southern Africa. The recent discovery of diamonds in Kimberley had raised the stakes and also gave more incentive to push further into it. British colonial authorities, especially Sir Bartle Frere, some name, the High Commissioner, sought to consolidate power by breaking the independence of native kingdoms, including the Zulu. Although Cetshwayo maintained diplomacy, he refused to dismantle the army that had preserved his nation's sovereignty. In December 1878, Frere had issued an ultimatum to disband the Zulu military and allow British control over international justice and pay compensation for minor cross-border incidents. Basically to just become a protectorate or a puppet state at that point. I don't know the correct definition, I think it is protectorate or vassal. The demands were obviously impossible for any independent king who wants to be independent to accept, and also especially for a warrior-based society, just like the Zulus had, where military was a whole part of their culture. When the deadline expired on January 11th, 1879, the British had got their Cassius Bell and invaded Zululand. Commanding the invasion was Lord Chelmsford, who divided his force into 3 columns. The central column, around 4,700 men, crossed the Buffalo River and advanced into Zululand, reaching Isandlwana on January 20th. The camp was pitched on open ground, accessible near water and wood for cooking, and with clear sightlines, but the camp lacked any fortifications or any sort of like encampment protective structures. It was all just tents and wagons. He also didn't even have scouts or sentries on the perimeter. Wagons remained spread out. Chelmsford dismissed warnings, believing Zulu resistance would be easily broken. So to sum it up, he was very ignorant and underestimated the Zulus, a fucking warrior-based society. This is important foreshadowing. On January 22nd, Lord Chelmsford left the column eastward, pursuing what he assumed was the main Zulu army. It wasn't. Left behind at the camp were around 1,800 men, including nearly 600 British regulars of the 1st Battalion, 24th Regiment of Foot, some Natal Irregulars, 2 7-pounder guns, and African auxiliaries under Colonel Henry Pauline. Later that morning, Colonel Anthony Durnford arrived with 500 mounted men to reinforce the camp. But Chelmsford had miscalculated. The main Zulu force, estimated at 20,000 to 22,000 men, was not ahead of him. They were actually hidden in a nearby valley, just miles off the British camp. At daybreak, normal camp activities proceeded, and the bugle call for breakfast was sounded at 7 AM. Then things began to go wrong. The first report came from a nearby hill that a large Zulu force was advancing towards the camp. The bugler sounded the stand to, which is prepare for action, to meet the Zulus. But in the still African morning, nothing happened, and the soldiers began to relax. The Zulu army was led by seasoned commanders Nshingwayo, Kamahol, and Mavu Mengwana Candela. I said them wrong, I'm really sorry. The Zulus had marched in silence for days, concealed by hills and scrubland. At around 10:30 AM, a patrol stumbled upon the position, triggering a premature attack. The element of surprise was gone, and the Zulu regiment surged forward in the traditional formation. The chest hit the British front, while the horns raced around the flanks to encircle them. Pauline deployed his men in an extended firing line, nearly a mile wide. The Martini Henry rifles opened up in deadly volleys, and the artillery hurled shells into the advancing ranks of Zulus. The Zulus quickly dove down to avoid the shells and artillery fire, and they quickly learned the fire rates like it was fucking Dark Souls fighting a boss. They learned the attacks, and the artillery became useless because whenever they were to fire, they dove down, it would fly over them harmlessly, they'd get back up and charge forward. Despite massive losses from the Zulu charge, momentum was not lost. Initially, some British officers joked and jeered, confident in their firepower, but the lines were too thin, and the ammunition supply chain broke down, and cartridges failed to reach the front in time. Troops began to run low, and morale began to waver. By early afternoon, the Zulus had breached the left and right flanks. The centre faltered, chaos erupted in the camp. Soldiers tried to form rallying squares, wagons were overturned, oxen stampeded, ammunition was nearly gone, bayonets were drawn. Colonel Durnford led a final stand with mounted men, buying precious moments for others to escape. When their ammo ran out, he ordered them to retreat while he and a small group of men fought to the death. His body was later found surrounded by his men in one of the battle's most famous acts of heroism. Lieutenants Teammouth, Melvin and Neville Coghill attempted to save the Queen's colours of the 1st and 24th. Fighting through Zulu lines on horseback, they crossed the Buffalo River. Coghill's horse was shot and Melvin was dragged under the current and both were killed. The colour was later found in the river and recovered weeks later. In 1907, they became among the first posthumous recipients of the Victoria Cross. 2 hours later, over 1,300 British and African auxiliary troops were cut down by spear and assegai. Around 60 men survived the battle. Quick context, it was 60 Europeans that survived the battle, not overall survivors. When Chelmsford returned to the camp that night, he found only bodies and an ocean of blood. Scattered survivors told of the slaughter. Many British corpses were found disemboweled. This was a ritual act by the Zulu warriors to release the spirits from the dead. It wasn't an act of mutilation, but more of spiritual belief, and also kind of nice if you think about it. The 1st Battalion of the 24th Regiment had been virtually annihilated. 52 officers were dead. More than had fallen in the entire Waterloo campaign. An officer who was lucky enough to survive the battle was artillery officer Lieutenant Henry Curling, by escaping on horseback. He wrote, "The camp was in possession of the enemy, who were killing the men as they ran out their tents. We went right through them and out the other side, losing nearly all of our gunners, and 1 or 2 of the sergeants. The road to Rockstraff that we hoped to retreat by was full of the enemies, so no way being opened, we followed a crowd of natives and camp followers who were running down a ravine. The Zulus were all among them, stabbing men as they ran, and finally the guns got stuck and could go no further. In a moment, the Zulus closed in, and the drivers were now alone. And the drivers who now alone remained were pulled off their horses and killed." A Zulu warrior who was later interviewed years later said, "Those red soldiers at Isandlwana, how few they were, and how they fought. They fell like stones, each man in his place." Another recalled, "The soldiers gave a shout and charged down upon us. There was an Nduna, an officer, in front of the soldiers with a long flashing sword, which he whirled round his head as he ran. They killed themselves by running down. They threw down their guns when the ammunition was done, and then commenced with their pistols, which they fired as long as their ammunition lasted. And then they formed a line, shoulder to shoulder, and back to back, and fought with their knives. Some covered their faces with their hands, not wishing to see death. Some entered into their tents, indignant, although badly wounded. They died where they stood, at their post. News of the defeat reached London in early February, causing shock, anger and disbelief. The British government hadn't been fully briefed by Ferry about the attack on Zululand, and initially were not overwhelmingly in the mood for war. However, this news galvanised the government to save face. Paradoxically, the Zulu victory at Isandlwana that was planned by Cetshwayo that was to be used to negotiate a peace deal only caused more death. Britain poured reinforcements into southern Africa, determined to avenge the loss. The Zulus were victorious, had stirred a colonial giant. This battle of Isandlwana stands as a testament to courage, discipline and military genius by both the British and Zulus. This battle also shattered the myth of British invincibility and reminded the world that even the greatest empires are not immune to defeat. This battle was also one of the worst defeats a technologically advanced army faced to an inferior one. And that's the video. That's pretty much it. Maybe a bit short, but there's more context in later episodes. Next video is the Battle of Rorkes Drift, which is one of my personal favourite battles in British history. But until then, I'll see you later, and goodbye. Also, I didn't really say anything, but yeah, it's a new background, and there's my armour that I bought. My helmet's up there, and there's my cool lion rampant.
That's my job. That's my job. That's my job.